Hello dear YouTuber friends, and I do hope you're all keeping well. Welcome to this new video. This is Back to Basics with Microsoft Flight Sim Part 38. It's about getting to know your actual physical instruments and dials in your aircraft off by heart. Getting to know them properly. So at a glance, you know what your aircraft is doing. You know if you're climbing, you know your heading, you know where your flaps lever is and gear lever is, and etc, etc. Mainly important just because, like I said, at a glance, you know what your aircraft is doing. What speed you're doing, what vertical rate of climb you're doing, your heading, your altitude, even your autopilot, and that type of thing. And another good reason for doing this, if you have snazzy multi-panels like I do, and these can fail sometimes, they can stop working for whatever reason, I can simply go to my aircraft. I know where all the different switches are, and I can manipulate these to control my aircraft properly. Well, okay, let's not dilly-dally. Let's get on with this video. So for this flight lesson, we're set up at Gatwick Airport, runway 26 left in the Cessna 182RG. Just a shout out again to Newt the Wales for this lovely livery, the Hoddison livery. Gonna link it down below in the description. He's got a flightsim.to page. Go and download it from there if you own this on PC. It's just a lovely livery. So big shout out to Newt the Wales there again. Let's jump inside the cockpit. Now, whenever I get a new aircraft, or whenever I fly a different aircraft, there's things I first look for. Let me just bring you down to this view. These are the airspeed indicator. What airspeed, in this case, it's going to be in knots, as you can see there, your aircraft is doing. Your altitude indicator, what altitude you're at. Currently we're at 200 feet above sea level at Gatwick Airport, which is correct. When we're up in the air, I'll be keeping an eye on that just to see what altitude the aircraft is doing. Big hand will be in thousands of feet, little hand will be in hundreds. So the little hand will go round and the big hand will move to 1,000, etc, 2,000, that type of thing. So get to know that properly. It can be different for different types of aircraft. And the other thing I look for is the vertical speed indicator. Now, many of you will know this, but I'll go over this with you again. If it's pointing, they're all pretty much similar vertical speed indicators. They may look slightly different in different aircraft, but they'll have a similar format. You'll have an arrow here, an indicator to show what vertical speed you're doing. Obviously we're on the ground, we're not doing any type of climbing or descending. So vertical speed is basically you'll either be climbing or descending. We're not doing anything, we're on the ground, so it's pointing towards the zero. If it's up in this range, it means we're climbing. If it's below the zero, it means you're descending. And it's in hundreds of feet, so that would be 100, 200, etc, 500, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000. If it's in this range, you're descending, same thing, 500, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000. So yeah, keep an eye on that when you're in the air. So if you're flying manually, you can quickly glance down to see if you're climbing, if it's above the zero, if it's below the zero, you're descending. And the other thing I look out for is the HSI. It's basically the horizontal situation indicator. Essentially your compass. As you can see, we're on runway 26 left here, so it's roughly 260 degrees. And as we fly, we can quickly glance down to see what bearing, what heading we're heading towards. The other thing I'll mention here, which is typical on dial aircraft, you'll have the heading, autopilot heading bug indicator here, or autopilot heading indicator as it's called here. Typically by default it's set at 0, but we'll come back to that in a moment. Other things I look out for when I'm flying an aircraft is where the landing gear is, parking brakes, Things like the throttle. Now, I'm using a flight control system. You may be using a HOTAS or yoke system. I'm not going to do these manually. I'm going to use my physical throttle to do these. But it's a good idea to take a quick glance down to see where they are. In this case, throttle, prop, and mixture. Another thing I'll keep an eye on. If I'm flying at altitude, I'll look at my EGT, my exhaust gas temperature. When you're flying, say, somewhere above 3,000 feet, you want to find the maximum, I call it the biting point, where it's not going backwards or forwards. You've got the biting points, the most effective EGT reading. But we won't be covering that in this video. And you've got the RPM, what revolutions per minute your aircraft will be doing. It's good to know where that is as well. And things like, because we will be using this in this video, your autopilot panel, which is down here. I've just got the default settings in the Cessna 182RG. If you have an autopilot unit, take a quick glance at it. Where's your autopilot button, your heading, your nav to follow your GPS course if you have one in, your approach button. These are going to all be important. And basically, if you press the arm there, you can input some vertical speed for your aircraft. One other thing, you've got a Garmin, this is the GNS 530, it's the default Garmin system for this Cessna 182RG. And I can range out with the map here, just to get a few more airports. What we'll be doing in this video, in this lesson, is flying towards EGLL. I'm going to fly back towards the east first, and then come round and land at EGLL. I'm going to be using the dials, the actual physical dials on this Garmin system. Now, by default with the GNS 530, it's in COM mode. So if I move these knobs, the bigger knob and little knob, bigger knob will change the figures before the decimal, little knob the figures after. I'm not going to bother with comms. I'm not using ATC. This will be basically for the ATC, the comms, or if you want to get ATIS, that type of thing. Not going to be using them in this video, but I am going to be using nav frequencies. To switch it to nav 1, right click on the smaller knob, and now you can see that's activated. We'll come back to this later because I will be tuning in for an ILS approach landing at EGLL and manipulating the physical knobs in the aircraft to set up for an approach there. I'll come back to that later. So I'm just going to do a bit of a quick setup with you here. We're at 200 feet. I think climbing using the autopilot unit, which is installed with the 182RG, I'm going to set a selected altitude using the bigger knob of 1,000 and then the smaller knob for 1,400 feet. So when I click on autopilot and I'm climbing, remember I talked about the vertical speed, make sure you're in a climb when you're taking off. Well, hopefully you will be, otherwise it will be a disaster. Once I click on autopilot, it will climb up to that 1,400 feet. I've covered this in other videos, and I'm going to link the Back to Basics playlist in the description as always, in case you need to cover some of these things I'm talking about. And I'm also going to be manipulating heading mode. So I talked about the autopilot heading, your heading bug, basically, heading indicator here. You can see it's set to north. If I click on autopilot and heading, it's going to turn the aircraft to the north. I want to come round to the east, so I'm going to mouse up on this autopilot heading indicator. And I want to make sure it turns to the right, so I'm going to put it on around 60 degrees to start with, and then I'll come back and turn this fully to the east once we're up in the air. So there we go, we're all set up. So when I take off, I'm going to keep an eye on my airspeed. Once I'm up in the air, I'm going to keep an eye on my altitude indicator and my vertical speed indicator here to make sure that I'm in a climb once I've raised my gear and goodness knows what. I'm also going to be putting in one stage of flaps here. So I'm just going to use my mouse, highlight a flaps lever, left click hold and put it down to one stage of flaps. And if we go outside the aircraft, you can see I've got one stage of flaps in. Okay, let's get flying. Okay, so we're going to do all this next part in one hit, one recording, I hope. So I'm going to release. I also want to find out where the parking brake is. Usually down here towards your rudder pedals, using physical rudders, obviously a physical yoke and physical throttle. So don't worry about them, using them manually. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to click on the parking brake to release it, throttle up, keep an eye on my airspeed indicator once it's around this range. So around 80 to 90 knots, I'm going to pull back on my yoke. Around 80 knots would do with one stage of flaps indeed. Just wants to take off. Just going to push my yoke forward so it doesn't take off prematurely. Now I can pull back. I can mouse up on my landing gear to raise it. And that should show you. I'm also going to left click and hold and raise my flaps. And I'm just going to use my trim. Again, trim, I'm using this physically. As you can see, I'm using the Honeycomb XPC yoke and I'm using the rocker switches like it's shown here for pitch trim, just to trim out. Go and refresh yourself back to basics video 1. We'll talk all about trim. I've got a slight climb going there. Just going to trim down so I'm not climbing too much. Now I'm going to press my autopilot button and heading select. So it's in autopilot mode, it's going to climb to 1,400 feet. I can see my flaps are up. This is the importance, you see. I can look down at my flaps to see where my flaps are. I can see they're up. I can see I'm climbing. And I can see I'm getting towards that 1,400 feet. I can see the autopilot. I can see outside it's turning me. But I can see where my heading bug is. I'm going to alter this to go directly east. And it gives you an indication here. I believe you will need some kind of piloting options there to turn them on. I'll put in writing maybe somewhere on the screen there, just to show you what you have to do. Select in the options to get that reading. I can see now it's on 90 degrees. And there you go, we've turned to our heading east. We've climbed to 1,400 feet. I was going to say, I thought it was going to climb a bit further. Now, sticking at 1,400 feet, we're not climbing. I can take a look at my vertical speed indicator to see I'm not climbing or descending. It's leveled off under autopilot at 1,400 feet, which is perfect. So I'm just going to turn the autopilot off. I almost pressed my multi-panel button there, but I won't. Naughty, naughty. And I'm going to take over manually to show you. I push down on my yoke. I can see I'm descending. I'm just going to push up a little, pull back a little bit on my yoke to get that vertical speed indicator back to 0. I never turn left or right. You may see this deflect. So I may need to put in a little bit of trim just to keep that at 0 so I'm not climbing or descending. There we go. So I'm just putting in a little bit of trim there. And we're back to 0. So do practice that, and just keep an eye on your vertical speed indicator to see if you're climbing or descending, see what heading you're on. I'm going to put it back into autopilot mode and heading mode. And it'll keep us at 1,400 feet. And a heading of 90 degrees. Now we're doing that, I'm going to come down here to see where 𝐀𝐂𝐓𝐔𝐀𝐋 is. It's up here. Soon I'm going to want to turn north and I'll manipulate my heading mode again. Before I do that, I'm going to bring up my, and you can do this in your own aircraft, VFR map. So I'm keeping everything default here for a reason, because you all should have this. I'm going to zoom out of the map a bit and see where 𝐀𝐂𝐓𝐔𝐀𝐋 is. 𝐀𝐂𝐓𝐔𝐀𝐋 is up here. And I'm going to zoom in on 𝐀𝐂𝐓𝐔𝐀𝐋 because I want to get some readings. If you click on the airport marker on your VFR map, I want to land and scroll down on this page. Click on the airport and it'll bring up all this information. I'm going to scroll down till I see ILS, and I want to get the ILS frequencies for 27 left, which is 109.50. So remember, I'm in the nav frequencies here now because I right-clicked on that as I showed at the beginning of this video. I'm going to change it using the bigger knob to 109. There you go. So I've just moused down 109.50. So I'm using all the default knobs. I'm not using any of my multi-panel shenanigans here. And you can click. So that's your backup frequency. I'm going to click this to make it active. And you should get the airport, the runway identifier, the ILS identifier, which is showing there. ILL, which is right. And it's 27 left, so we know we're locked onto the right one. We're in GPS mode. I want to get to localizer mode, or VLOC mode. So I've clicked on that now. Another thing to keep an eye on here is your bearing. It's going to be different for each aircraft, but you should have a course select lever. It's telling us to change that to 270. So I'm going to do that, 270. I could have moused down, it would have been quicker. Just going to mouse up quickly though. 270. Now, we'll get some course deviation line. You'll see something change here once we get closer to the airport later. But I'm just going to change all that. So that's the course select, ILS 27 left. And I've got the right readings here. I will have, once we get closer, we're coming away from the airport. So in that case, I've got all this set up, 270. And you saw before that it was locked on, but we've just come away. We're too far away from the ILS to pick up. So I'm going to change my heading back to north. Let me just come up one view. I'll come down to that view so you can see what's happening outside the aircraft. So I'm going to change this, mousing down to change this back to a northerly heading, which will be 0 degrees, or 360. Whichever way you want to look at that. It's showing 0 there, which is right. Now, the aircraft is descending. You can see that. So I'm going to come down. I wasn't expecting that. I'm going to arm vertical speed, and I'm just going to push up. That's better. I'm going to push up on this button, the up or down, just so I climb at 400 feet per minute. So when you press arm there, make sure you got the vertical speed. That's VS stands for vertical speed. And now I'm climbing at 400 feet per minute, back up to 1400 feet. So it's lucky I caught that, because I wasn't paying attention. I was playing around with other bits and pieces. But now the aircraft's climbing back up to our 1400 feet. I believe it's because I put it into manual mode and started playing around, and the aircraft got confused and it started to descend. So I want to make sure that we're back, and it's lucky I did, because we're coming up to a hill here. Back towards our 1400 feet. And we're coming northwards. And EGLL is just to the... If I come to this view, we are climbing. I can see that vertical speed indicator is showing upwards above the 0, so we're climbing. And I can see my altitude indicator is getting to that 1,400 feet. I'll leave that going. I'm going to trust that. I'm going to range out. EGLL is over here, so when we get to around here, past Big, I shall turn slightly to the left using the autopilot still. Using my autopilot indicator here, bank slightly to the left to try and get back towards. Well, it's picked back up on EGLL now, as you can see. But and we're in VLOC, but this course deviation line isn't. It's all centered, so we're not close enough quite to pick up the ILS properly, but we will be soon. So we'll keep on flying. Like I said, I'll do this in one cut. Now, I'm above 160 knots. I'm going to bring back my throttle. I've got it now to around 70%. There's no need to go that fast. As you can see, the airspeed is dropping. So if we zoom in on that, you can see that's dropping slightly back towards 150. Probably get it to around 140 knots. So bring it back to maybe 60%, and that will do. No need to bomb. You can see now we're at our 1,400 feet and everything's fine there. And the vertical speed indicator is back towards the centre. Apart from that bit of wind that just blew us up slightly. But it's generally back towards the centre, which is where it should be. I'm going to move my altitude heading autopilot heading indicator. I'm going to mouse down just so I can bank slightly to the left, so I'm heading somewhere towards 𝐀𝐂𝐓𝐔𝐀𝐋, as you can see there, because I want to get this course deviation line showing now. I've got the right course select setting according to the VFR map. I think it's slightly off. That should be like 271, 272 or something, but it will do. And autopilot is now banked slightly, a little bit more to the left there. Maybe to 330 will do. There you go, 330 degrees. And you should see that course deviation line go left or right there. I've covered this in other videos as well, in the Back to Basics, if you want more detail of what the course deviation line is. But it will generally show us whether we're left or right off the runway. And effectively, this should deflect to the right there. We're going to be left off the runway. So this course deviation line should be up here in a moment, once we get a bit closer to that airport. And again, I'm just looking. I will be, when we're coming into land, I will be using the autopilot. Once the, well, I'll talk about this later, but I will be looking at where my approach mode button, there you go, course deviation line has deflected. And we're coming towards the airport. Once this course deviation line starts to come in, I'm going to press the approach mode and the autopilot will basically take us in for a landing. So I'm just going to keep an eye on this, and I'll be physically using my physical landing gear to bring it down, and physical flaps here in the aircraft to bring them down, keeping an eye on my airspeed. I'm going to bring my throttle back to 50% now. There we go, because I want to get it around here, this marker for gear down speed, and then try to get it into flap speed gradually. So keeping an eye on my instruments, still at 1400, still we're not climbing or descending. Vertical speed indicator is neutral, it's pointing towards the 0. Airspeed slowly coming down. Let's bring that just below half throttle now. I do want to bring this down. Just waiting for that course deviation line to move in, and I'll press the approach mode button. And the autopilot should line us up. We've got the right course select, as I showed you before, using the physical knob. I'm not going to mess around with the autopilot heading bug any longer. London City ahead of us. I wonder how this is going to render today. Looking fine so far, but let's stay inside the aircraft just to keep an eye on what's going on. Everything's showing here correctly. You can see 𝐀𝐂𝐓𝐔𝐀𝐋, it's the right reading for the ILS. ILS 27 left. Everything's looking dandy, isn't it? Bring my throttle back 45%. I do want to get that speed down. This course, you can see where we are in relation to 𝐀𝐂𝐓𝐔𝐀𝐋 there, Heathrow Airport. It's going to start moving in that course deviation line, because we're going to pass over the threshold of the runway. We're almost there. So I'm hovering over approach mode. Oh, we should see London City, but I'm not going to get distracted. It's just beyond, I believe. Yeah, course deviation line's moving in. Approach mode selected. And we're slowing down as well, which is nice. I'm going to leave the throttle where it is, in fact. We're going to fly through London towards Heathrow at the moment. So we should be fine. And now, with approach mode selected, the autopilot, because we put in the correct course, it's basically manipulating these lines where these yellow lines are on your HSI. Because we've set that correctly, it's now going to line us up for runway 27 left. I hope. No, it will do. Everything will be fine. Heathrow Airport's just ahead of us there. And because autopilot's got control of this, I'm not too worried now. One thing I'll mention as well, if you're doing this kind of procedure, see where your glide slope or glide path indicators are in the Cessna 182. In this case, this is where they are, these yellow ones. I've got it in approach mode, I don't need to worry about these, but these will start to come down. You'll see these start to come down to here, and the autopilot, because we've got it in approach mode, will keep it locked on. They keep these yellow indicators in the centre, bringing us down on a perfect approach path. So runway 27 left. So we won't be too long here. Now it's safe to take a look outside, see how London's doing. I guess it's okay. Looks mainly rendered, which is good. Still rendering. It's always a busy place to render. Heathrow, London City, basically. Downtown London. Not worried now, the autopilot's in approach mode, it's got control basically. I just need to control my speed when these indicators start, ideally before they start moving down. If we look at our GNS 530, as you can see there, we're approaching London Heathrow. Everything's set up, we've got the right frequency, otherwise this wouldn't be showing. We can range it in a little bit. Yeah, we're somewhat approaching that. These indicators will start moving down very soon. I'm going to bring... Let's just see. Let's just clear these buildings to the right of me. Get past London City, effectively. Now, I do have Orbix South, GB South installed, so if your London looks slightly different, if you're seeing an extra building or two, I'm not sure you will in this area. You may do. Oh, well, that's not rendered in, is it? Let's get back inside the aircraft. Everywhere else is fine apart from London for me nowadays. Don't know what's going on. But we'll ignore that and just keep inside the aircraft. I'm sure you, a lot of you have similar issues there. Okay, I'm going to go gear down, so I'm going to use my physical gear in the aircraft. We look outside quickly, see the gears come down. And once I feel I get a little bit closer to Heathrow Airport, I'm going to slow us down. And again, it's getting to know your instruments. I'm going to slow us down to this white ribbon, as you can see on the speed there. So you can see that white ribbon. Get us so it's just below 100 knots. And then I can properly, shall we say, go to stage 1 flaps. Just going to keep an eye on my glide slope, glide path indicators here. Just see if I can see them moving down. I'm getting towards stage 1 flaps. It's getting somewhat towards that, isn't it? Just a bit slower. And then, you know, because you're near that, it's safe to go there. Maybe just a little bit slower. Let's do this properly. Don't want to teach bad habits. There's the runway ahead of us, so we know we're lined up. The autopilot's doing a very good job for us. Wee bit slower. It's probably around 40% throttle. There you go, it's just almost touching it, isn't it? That will do for your first stage of flaps. So left click and hold, stage 1 flaps in. And I want to do that, you want to do that before it starts descending under the glide. I mean, I could have waited till these indicators started moving down, but before these start moving down, because you've got it in approach mode, it will lock on and start following the glide path down, or glide slope down. you want to have your aircraft at a good speed. I can see the RPMs of the aircraft here. Seem to be like green line there, or green region. Shows it in optimal range. It's all looking good. Still at 1,400. We've not started to descend yet, but I think these are moving down slightly, or they will in a minute. So let me know, please, do you appreciate the whole of the flight when I do these videos? I didn't really want to cut this one. I wanted to show you the whole flight, just to show you from start to finish what I'm doing and what I'm looking at in the aircraft. I'm still looking at my instruments to see what they're doing. Mainly these glide path, glide slope indicators to see where these, what these are doing, whether these are coming down. I think they are slowly here. Also keeping an eye, I'm just glancing at my altitude, airspeed especially, because I don't want to go too slow now. Vertical speed, I know it's going to keep level until we start descending. And ahead of me, keeping an eye of where that runway is. And it's just there. Yeah, do let me know if you appreciate the whole of the flights for these videos. Or whether you prefer me to cut these and come back when we're on important stages. I think with back to basics, it's important to show the whole flight, just in case you want to do these flights yourself, the same flight, then you can just follow me as I go along. But do let me know in the comments. And if you do let me know, I know people are still watching at this stage, which is great. Coming down. We're not at the moment, there's still not. Should be any second now. But we're at the right speed on the flaps. I could have gone to flaps a little bit later than I did, but never mind. See, this part renders fine, doesn't it? You get outside of that crumpled old town. Why can't London looks like this? Is that an Orbix South edition? I've seen various buildings dotted around these parts as well that I don't remember seeing, but I could be mistaken. Come on, old fellas, start moving down, please. See, we're perfectly lined up. I could take it off autopilot at this point. In fact, I'm going to turn my autopilot off. I've done autopilot approach videos before. I've got manual control of this, so I'm going to keep an eye. I'm going to bring my speed back a bit because I want to keep it as we start to descend in that flaps range. Go to the second stage. Now I can see these indicators moving down. It's no longer under autopilot control. I've got control, and I'm going to try and keep these indicators in the center. I've got the runway right in front of me, so I've got a visual representation of the runway. I'll soon be able to see the PAPI lights as well, so they'll guide me in. 2 red, 2 white, so I'll probably pay more attention to them whilst glancing at my instruments. Probably best I did take it off autopilot so I could show you this in practice. So there we go. Now I've slowed down, so I'm just going to bring back, pull back on my yoke to keep those indicators in the centre where they are at the moment. Keeping an eye on my instruments. I'm going to go to another stage of flaps. The aircraft will want to flare, but it will start to want to nose down after. Keeping the indicators, I need to descend slowly to keep those, get those indicators back into the centre. These 2 yellow indicators. can see the puppy lights, so I'll probably follow them. Because they're pretty much, well, arguably a better guide to how you are on your approach. I can see the puppy lights just about now. Speed's good. I will bring my throttle back. I'm already at 25%. But I will bring my throttle back in a moment. There we go. We got a good approach going on there. All manual control. I'm going to bring my throttle back slightly there. When I put in flaps, the nose wants to raise a little bit more than I want, but bringing back that throttle will ease that, so I don't have to put too much pushing or pulling on the yoke, and I can keep a good glide path. Bit low there, as you see, and you can see from the indicators, from the puppy lights and the indicators, they're above me now, so I'm just going to raise my nose, get those indicators back to the centre. And the puppy lights, 2 whites, 2 reds as well. Let's do a proper landing here, so no short landings. Keeping an eye, I'm looking at my, you can't see me doing it, but I'm looking at my airspeed indicator specifically now, because I don't want to stall the aircraft, but we're well away from that. 2 white, 2 reds. I'm looking at the puppy lights now, I'm following them for guidance. You can either follow your indicators here, or the puppy lights. Puppy lights are there for a reason, so I'm going to trust them and follow them down, because they are next to the runway. Like I said, arguably they give you the best guidance. Oh, a bit high, but better high than low. No connotations there. Right, 2 white, 2 red. Let's keep it there. So I'm just puppy light guidance here. Now I'm over the runway pretty much, so I'm going to bring that throttle back to near minimal and glide the aircraft. I'm not worried about indicators or puppy lights. I'm over the runway now. Still glancing at my airspeed to see what's going on there, and just glide the aircraft, just float the aircraft a little bit here now. Let's try and smoke this. It will do, won't it? Just come off to the left. It's fine. Yep, Heathrow have granted me clearance just to come off to the left there. In fact, on that sim, they often want you to come off if you're in a GA aircraft, wherever you can. And there we go. And we're down, we're safe, parking brake on. Let's get outside the aircraft. So there you go. That's Back to Basics Part 38. Getting to know the instruments in your aircraft. So important to know where your dials, what your dials are telling you, what your aircraft's doing. Know where things like your flaps and gear lever is, just in case your snazzy panels start to fail. And regardless, it's good to know, because you know then, by glancing down, what your flaps are, what your landing gear is telling you, what your autopilot and Garmin system and goodness knows what is telling you. Give this a try. Do let me know your thoughts on the video. I do hope it's been helpful to you. Subscribe for more videos, more in the Back to Basics series to come, and I'll be seeing you soon.